Hi, I'm David Bell. Welcome to episode 6 in the Effective Church Leaders series. Each time I share one key concept that you can apply to your study group or congregation. Today, we are looking at the concept behind evangelism, and that's a problem. Why so? It's because that word evangelism has had such a very bad press for a long time. The concept behind evangelism is positive, not negative. So let's abandon the word and call it faith sharing instead. Everyone has a faith to share. Doesn't matter whether you're an agnostic, an atheist, or whether you're religious. We all have a set of values by which we live. Now, part of enculturation is to share those values, pass them on, simply because society considers they're important. So values like justice or compassion tend to run through and around and in most cultures. They've even become enshrined among civilized countries as a set of fundamental human rights. The Declaration of Universal Human Rights by the United Nations may not be enacted universally, but its significance for all humanity can't be overestimated. But the interesting thing about these values, which tend to be framed as universal, is the fact that they must still be passed on. They need to be taught. They need to be learned. They are not, as the American Constitution suggests, self-evident. And that leads to the aim of this episode. Let me frame it as a question. How can values and faith be effectively shared? In a nutshell, life has its stages. As we grow up and through those stages, we change and grow in all kinds of ways. For faith sharing to be effective, it comes down to one key idea. Timing is everything. Why so? James Fowler's research into the phases of Christian life explain it clearly. As we grow up and into adulthood, we move through 6 stages of understanding faith. Leaving aside the first couple of years as an infant, Fowler says stage 1 is intuitive and projective. Between 2 and 4 years old, that's stage 1, our cognitive powers are growing. Along with that, our lives are filled with fantasy. Vivid images dance before us, and stories make a real impact on us. But reasoning with a child in this phase, trying to teach them moral values, faith values, just doesn't usually work. Cognitively, they're not equipped to handle it, which is why churches are notoriously bad with early childhood education. Stage 2, however, represents a new life phase. Fowler called this the mythic literal phase. It happens between 5 to 12 years, roughly. That is the period of primary school education. Here we begin to internalize stories and symbols. We want to make sense of our own self. At the same time, we also begin to form a more accurate picture or perception of others. In this period, justice emerges as reciprocity. Here it's possible to talk moral values, but it tends to be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth form of morality. The power of the story, myth, and the power of the story to transform is almost taken literally. Almost always taken literally. For example, the Bible's been written down, and in it it says it's true, therefore it must be true. Fundamentalists get stuck around stages 2 and 3 of faith development. They can be however many years old as adults, but they haven't been able to move beyond the mythic, literal phase of faith development. Stage 3 is from 12 years up, moving to 20 plus. Fowler called it the synthetic conventional phase. And these later teenage years are almost always a struggle. It's the common lot of families. In faith terms, we now synthesize a huge amount of faith-related information from beyond the family. Peer pressures become very strong. They're very subtle and highly influential. Beneath the surface, in our subliminal world, there are not only the hormonal drives of sexual identity emerging, but also the psychological masks we need to create which keep our ego identity increasingly distinct from family. Faith at this stage of life seems to emerge as a way of making diverse elements cohere. Stage 4 is different again. It's the phase of really early adulthood, 20 to 30-ish. Fowler called faith in this formation period individuative and reflective. It's who we personally are that is now held in tension consciously with peers, family and work factors. Now, something quite striking is happening in the unconscious realm of our psyche in this phase. From a faith perspective, our values emerge. Those powerful, personal, subliminal symbols from earlier phases are now pointing to something beyond the personal. The crucial question is, will our early faith ideals hold? Indeed, should they hold? Maturity in this phase will involve a lot of rejections of earlier beliefs. Jesus didn't have these psychological tools at his disposal, but he decisively demonstrated the practical knowledge of what faith really starts to mean in this phase of early adulthood. It involves a conscious rejection of father, mother, brother, sister, and social structure. As he said of his disciples and other would-be followers, "These are my mother, brothers," etc. This is a savage overthrow of conventional family dynamics. It was completely against enculturated family values. Now, effective church leaders have to really follow this up with adults in their study groups and congregations. In New Zealand, we have a Christian organisation, just for example, that is called Family First. It has a national following, but the values it promotes are almost always in the first 2, possibly 3 stages of faith development. As an example of how not to share faith, Family First is right up there. Now, stage 5 in the Fowler scheme is called the Conjunctive faith phase. It begins to join the paradoxes of life together. Family First can't do that. Faith in the Conjunctive phase allows us to hold together opposites. We have created a new family based on our individual needs and reflections on life. Possibly now we also have children of our own. So family has come to mean something wider because we've placed ourselves within a faith community, a church. And life in community brings up all the fullness of faith and community with all its diversity and all the people at these various faith stages. And that leads to Fowler's final stage, 6, a later adult phase which he called universalizing faith. Here we leave aside faith as a personal component of life. Instead, we seek a wider meaning and context. We find ourselves striving towards the universal, like the UN Declaration. Our faith takes on a new quality altogether. It's now open to the power of the future through altruism. That is, it's disinterested in personal identity and instead seeks a common good that will benefit all, both in and beyond community. In this phase, I've seen many folks say they no longer see God as a person, but rather as personal. That marks a huge shift in outlook. Faith sharing is a key driver in this phase because it enables and encourages others to that freedom. Freedom to explore beyond the personal. Can you identify where you are at on Fowler's faith spectrum? What seems most comfortable to you? Can you identify where your study group members, or even your congregation as a whole, is at? And what can be done to enable them to grow through to that final stage of freedom and faith, and then community will truly come alive? Doing this is effective faith sharing. It's a world away from the evangelism done by so many church groups. Try it in your ministry context and see what happens. Join me next week when we talk about inclusivity. And thanks for watching.